Stand Together is proudly sponsored by Allflex Livestock Intelligence. Allflex helps you connect the dots to make complex decisions. Breeding, managing, marketing. Bring it all together with Allflex. Coming up, today's commercial cattle producers rely on the best science to make profitable genetic decisions. International Genetic Solutions offers a powerful answer to that call, bringing leading cattle breeds, businesses, and cutting-edge research to the table. Here, a panel of experts discuss the power of multi-breed data, the future of beef cattle evaluation, and the IGS effort to stand together.
Welcome. My name is Chip Kemp. I'm with the American Simmental Association and International Genetic Solutions. Welcome to the IGS Forum. Let me introduce our speakers and panelists for the next 30 minutes of your life. From Kansas State University, we have Dr. Bob Weaber. From the Red Angus Association of America, we have Tom Brink. And from Allied Genetic Resources, we have Marty Ropp. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And so, Tom, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and kind of set the table, as it were. We got a lot of folks watching and listening.
Well, Chip, it's about collaboration, and it's something that was very novel not more than 10 years ago, and now it's become the world's largest genetic evaluation for beef cattle, which is very exciting, actually, and it's accomplishing things that we really, a decade ago, we could have only dreamed about. And really what it's all about is working together and sharing data and combining data, and because data is the power and the lifeblood of genetic evaluation. And so by combining data across these many breeds, we're almost up to 20 breeds now, and over 20 million cattle records, you have much more power to calculate EPDs, to estimate EPDs more accurately. I think really what we need to think about when we think about IGS is how much it benefits the cattle industry as a whole, as well as the participating breeds.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Weber, Tom mentions that unique data effort together. Describe the uniqueness of a multi-breed eval. What can you parse out of that that's a little unique, a little different? And directly then, from a commercial producer's perspective, really what's the value of all that?
Yeah, so I think one of the really pioneering pieces of, well, we can go clear back in history to the multi-breed international cattle evaluation at Simmental, pre-IGS even, and think about the value of being able to do a better genetic evaluation of animals that are of admixture breed composition. So say Simmental Angus, Simmental Red Angus, those breeds now in a multi-breed evaluation are contemporary together, so they have a head-to-head competition. It's not just factoring out breed effects, it's direct head-to-head competition for their additive genetic merit for whatever trait we're looking at. And that's really powerful because it gives us a better opportunity to evaluate the genetic differences between individuals of different breed composition. And so having a genetic evaluation that's designed from the beginning with that in mind really adds power to not only the EPD calculation, but I think Tom made this point, the benefit of the commercial industry. Being able to go in and look at animals on a head-to-head basis across the whole breadth of traits that are evaluated, and decide, for my particular production circumstance, what level of genetic potential do I need, and how do I bring that into a breeding system that allows me to exploit the opportunities and values of breed complementarity and heterosis.
So, Marty, we're talking at kind of a big picture industry level here for a couple minutes, but you represent and work with a large swath of pretty progressive seed stock operators and an even larger swath of commercial producers who are leveraging that information for them. So let's make it real at that level. Since this inception of this program, what do you think that does to benefit that family back on the farm or ranch? What tools does this give them?
First of all, our business is a multi-breed business. I mean, we represent and offer genetics from 5 or 6 different breeds and different sets of composites. First of all, it really helps those folks that are purchasing those bulls or semen or whatever it is, purchasing genetics. It helps them to identify which of those combinations they'd like to use, how they're going to manage their crossbreeding program and do the best job that they can. We are absolutely in our business committed to crossbreeding, as the industry has to be, and will be increasingly more demand on cross as we start talking about things like sustainability, how we're going to reduce footprints and things like that. We no longer can straight breed commercial cattle, and so having those tools that allow us to combine breeds smartly and effectively and have the best evaluation, genetic evaluation, genomic evaluations we can, it's a no-brainer. We've got to have it, and the larger and more robust the population and the database and the science that we're able to gain from that and pull out of that for the commercial cattle business and ultimately the whole beef industry. That's what we have to have.
Yeah. And how interesting is it, Tom, that in an era where we work predominantly through the filter of breed associations, right? And yet I think all of our breed associations would echo exactly what Marty just said. This concept of crossbreeding and heterosis is what benefits our clientele. How do you see the mental hurdle of some of our seed stock firms or associations? How do you feel like we see crossbreeding as a collective across those breed associations?
Well, I think Marty more or less said it, and that is the island mentality of breeds is sinking fast. And crossbreeding is something that we do absolutely have to have in this industry. And that's what IGS is founded on and built upon. And you can think about it too a little bit from the individual breed perspective. I mean, the fact that our EPDs are on a level playing field, genetic merit is genetic merit across those breeds that participate in IGS, that's very powerful. It makes it much more simple for the commercial producers that are using our tools, to say the least. But I think also from an individual breed perspective, there is absolutely a tremendous amount of value in the additional information that comes into, in our case, Red Angus, from other breeds that are participating in IGS. We have bulls, in fact, our high-use bulls in the Red Angus breed, many of them have 7 to 10 times more information than they would have if it was a single breed evaluation just looking at Red Angus. That's true across many of the participating breeds, of course, in IGS. That's the power of that collaboration and really working together.
So you talk about some of the tools that we're using to do that. One of the tools, Dr. Bob, that's becoming so popular is the concept of genomics. It's everywhere in our business. It has been, and there are different approaches. So we attack that a little different inside the IGS eval than maybe some different evaluations in terms of how we maximize the accuracy of prediction that we incorporate from those panels. Could you maybe delve into that just a little bit?
Sure. So I think one of the real strengths of the IGS evaluation is the implementation of the Bolt software that uses a genetic evaluation model that, as you say, leverages the data maybe more completely than some other breeds do. And the way they do that is really twofold. It's one, doing a better job modeling the relationships between individual animals and their grandparents. So if you remember if we think about a traditional paper pedigree, we assume that all the animals are related 1/4 or 25% to each of their grandparents. But we know through the genetic assortment that happens across generations that that's not always true. In fact, it ranges from 0 to half. And so being able to construct a relationship structure in the data that more precisely aligned with the inheritance of genetic material allows us to do a better job calculating EPDs. That part makes sense. The other part that the Bolt model and IGS uses is a marker effects model. So we not only do a better job modeling the pedigree, but we also go through the data and find specific markers in the data that are aligned with individual traits that have large effects or larger effects on those traits. So somewhere around 1,500 to 2,500 markers per trait off the 50K panel are used in the prediction of the genetic merit of individuals for those various traits. And so we use the genomic data kind of in that sort of twofold approach, doing a better job modeling pedigree and then modeling direct effect of those markers on individual traits.
So all three of you have had experiences in a whole wide swath of sectors, but interestingly, even Dr. Weber and Marty, both of you have had some breed association work. And it's probably not an accident that you were deeply involved at a time that was kind of that era that was a precursor, right? It was kind of the proto IGS as we kind of built into what we now know, this big collaborative effort. As you see some of the mental shifts, Marty, in association mindset and how that services seed stock folks, any thoughts that and how that perspective, that philosophy has changed?
It is absolutely a different situation than it was then. At that point, it was still castles and moats, and we protect our breed and we fight against everything else. There's nothing better than ours. It worked, it drew members for a while until the genetic value wasn't there anymore, and then we lost customers and we lost members. As we began then to work our way back through the first multi-breed Cavanese EPDs, the first multi-breed carcass EPDs, the introduction, the way that all the multi-breed traits, because we knew that this was going to be a multi-breed business long term, and that essentially not take into account the positive genetic attributes of other breeds and being able to capture genes, crossbreed the way we wanted to, that was a past notion. That time was past, it was gone. IGS, I think, was the third attempt at trying to create that relationship. The first time everybody said, that's crazy. The second time they said, well, maybe it's not so crazy. And the third time they said, this is a really good idea, let's plow forward.
So you touched on to something that makes me think how much effort and time we all put into some of the novel, exciting traits that we're all dreaming about, we're all hungry for. And Dr. Weaber, you certainly work with the technical team quite a little bit in some of that area. Talk to me about both the challenges and the advantages of novel trait development in this sort of program.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges of any kind of new trait development is gathering records. And so certainly one of the advantages of the IGS system is if we can all come to some agreement on what the phenotype is, what trait we're trying to measure, and we deploy that, we have the opportunity to collect a lot more records more quickly because we've got a lot more breeders gathering up data. And certainly as we think about the multi-breed context that we've talked about, one of the challenges in new trait development for a multi-breed evaluation is having not only the purebreds of each of those breeds represented, but in many cases the crosses of those breeds. And so one of the key factors in getting those new traits over the hump, if you will, in terms of deployment, is gathering those records. And so, when you've got this already existing collaboration of the organizations, it makes that step a lot easier, right? So it's the deployment becomes much more engaging for individual breeds because they're part of the team, right? And everybody's pulling the wagon ahead.
There's something else that we ought to mention here, Chip, as we talk about just the benefit to the individual breeds. And that is the fact that the affordability of the entire system. We have a lot of small and medium-sized breeds within IGS, and really that's what most of us are. Some are larger, but we have a lot of just medium-sized breeds and some smaller ones. So, but yet by collaborating, we can afford the best scientists and really the best science available for genetic evaluation. That in itself is very powerful for the individual breed member.
Well, and to pull on that just a second more, Tom, and it kind of dovetails from what Dr. Bob threw out, is we talk about sharing the data, and we do, but you actually touched into something I think is crucial. We share a lot of sweat equity and mind power together well, right? It's not just putting the numbers in a magic box and some individual pulls it together. We've got folks from each population, each association intimately involved on a regular basis. And so I don't know your perspective on that, but I think that's a level of collaboration that shows we're all in, right? We're buying into this deal when we have personnel working cross-cultural.
And I think, Chip, one of the points here too is to Tom's is that the amount of intellectual capacity around the evaluation, not only from breeds, but from academia and USDA, is substantial. Sharing those resources and leveraging them in a really concerted and focused effort helps us all individually make more progress because we've collaborated.
Our International Genetic Solutions discussion continues after this. From DNA to EPD to ADG to yield and grade, Allflex helps you capture powerful insight. Seed stock to cow-calf, feedlot to processor. Let's all use data to raise more profitable beef. And while we're at it, you can connect dots on your operation to raise and sell better cattle. At Allflex, we help you bring it all together. Stand Together is brought to you by Allflex Livestock Intelligence, the leader in animal ID and monitoring. From DNA to EPD to ADG to yield and grade, bring it all together with Allflex.
Welcome. I'm going to take this to the seed stock producer. For us, as we generate these tools that Tom talked about, the first implementer of those tools are the seed stock folks, right? Your folks that you work with, they're the ones who are going to decide if we're going to actually move the ball down the field or if it's just going to be an academic exercise. And so, as you've seen some different traits either come to the fore or be evolved, or things, it was mentioned, multi-breed stay, how have some of those tools very directly given them more ability to service their clientele?
The seed stock producers we work with are absolutely committed to using the genetic evaluation to make a population of cattle that is better each and every generation for their customers, and then let their customers use some of the tools that are available downstream to make those decisions if they choose to, so that their customers never have to have the conversation with Bob Weber that he just had 2 questions ago, where he described the inner workings of the genomic part of the evaluation. No, we need tools that are easy to use, they're comparable across breeds, and can help us achieve our goals as commercial customers too, one step below the seed stock producers, who are truly the primary target of genetic evaluation.
For those associations who have watched what IGS has become, and maybe they're at this point they're not a direct player in IGS, but maybe they've been considering, should a multi-breed be important or be relevant for them? What would you suggest to those folks who are kind of kicking the tire, as it were?
I would say keep kicking the tires and really understand how they might fit into our processes at IGS. And I think it's the direction things are going, so it's going to be harder and harder for small, especially small and medium-sized breeds, maybe even large breeds, to stay outside of these collaborative genetic evaluations, because there's just so much more data there. The science we've mentioned, the depth of the science, the strength of the team, and the affordability of that to all is pretty hard to ignore, as opposed to for an individual breed association to get even halfway close to doing much of that on a single breed basis, pretty hard to do. But I look at what we're doing at IGS and the traits that we have and the traits that we will add over the next few years, and they all matter, and they all affect value because they impact the industry. And so that's where I think as an individual breed you have to look at that, you have to think about that and say, I really probably need to be a part of it.
So Dr. Weber, he touched about how all these traits are important, and we need a whole slew of data coming in. But no question, in the last couple of years, there have been a handful of traits that we've emphasized more. They fall under different names, but typically they come in the genre of maternal longevity metrics and carcass collection, carcass metrics. Any tips, ideas there to both either seed stock folks or commercial folks on how they can better find a way to incorporate some of those tough data points, or why should they bother? Because it's heavy duty stuff, it's hard to collect.
Yeah, I think there's, and you hit on, I think, at least as I think about the 2 primary areas where we need to continue to reinforce, in some cases, new trait development, but most certainly data accumulation, so collecting additional data observations. And that is around the area of maternal or fertility, kind of performance of cows, and we can look at that in a number of ways. Heifer pregnancy, an early indication of fertility as we get females moved into the system, but as separate and distinct traits, cow longevity or stayability goes by lots of different names, lots of different analytical approaches to capture that. But being sure we're building data capture systems that are whole herd focused, so we have the ability to measure those cow longevity traits in a reliable way, encouraging producers to accurately report disposal codes. If we had great disposal code data across all the IGS partners, how might we be able to make genetic improvement in some disease traits that affect fertility or longevity of cows? Feet and legs is another area that may be closely related there. And then most certainly carcass, right? So we know we collect a fair number of ultrasound records across our various breed groups, but those aren't substitutes necessarily directly for actual carcass observations. Certainly the IGS team and breeds are working to think about those opportunities and how might we get them better aligned.
Your friends actually have to collect that data, right? We get to talk about it. You got to find a way to get it to us. What are some tips you've had, either your experience doing this on the other side of the table or experiences you see now or successful measures to help incentivize that data capture?
I think the first answer to it is that you're either a professional seed stock producer and you collect all the data, or you're not a professional seed stock producer because you don't collect the data and you don't assimilate it right, present it right, send it in correctly in the right contemporary groups to where it has value. That's the first piece of incentive, is you're either in this business or you're not in the business. But some of the things that the association has done, which I think have been really good, particularly maybe this isn't quite data submission, but it's tissue submission with the cow herd roundup and now the calf crop roundup, I think it's what you call the new program. Those things have been phenomenal as far as encouraging people to go ahead, take that extra step, and invest what is a substantial amount of money in the future of their businesses and ultimately the future of their customers' businesses and their customers' businesses. Those things have been really, really good. It has been, I will say that it's been more difficult on some of the physical trait measures, the new ones, the scoring, some of those things. It has been more difficult to incentivize seed stock producers to add another level of data collection.
Chip, if I might jump in there's something else that we talk about quite a bit, and that is, and there's a misconception, and this is a comment to the individual breeder, the individual seed stock breeder, that like you said, they're challenged a little bit to submit as much data as they maybe would like to, and as that we would like them to submit. But keep in mind one thing as an individual breeder: when you collect data on multiple traits, it benefits your individual herd the most, because that data goes right into the evaluation for your animals. Yes, there is a bigger picture, kind of that ripple effect, that it does help the whole evaluation too, but you concentrate as an individual breeder, when you submit your data, you concentrate the benefit of that information on your own cattle. So you can be a little bit selfish in your thinking there and say that if I work a little bit harder and submit data on more traits, maybe it's some of those novel traits that we're talking about now and in the future, it is going to benefit me as an individual breeder. So we can't forget that. It really will help the EPDs and that person's individual herd.
And so, Dr. Weber, in terms of some of this mass data collection, when we're looking at whole contemporary groups, genotypes across those, whether it's carcass incentives or maternal metrics, what are the implications of that sort of collection, especially when it's incorporated with genomics long-term to not only the eval, but more importantly, the folks who are going to put it to work?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind there, Chip. One of them's, when we build a whole herd data system and collect whole contemporary groups, we have a more accurate genetic evaluation system. We do a better job. I like to call it, the giving of or assigning of credit and assigning of blame, right? And so making sure that all the calves get reported across the contemporary group does a better job documenting the superiority of the good ones, but it also makes sure that we identify the bad ones, right? They didn't get left out of the data stream, right? And I remember as a staff member, once in a while, I would get comments from breeders about, well, I sent you the best 5 calves, why don't they look great? Well, because you didn't compare them to the bad ones, right? So practical things like that I think are really important, and one of the benefits of the IGS collaboration is, not only the research part, but I'll say the extension part too, right? So being able to share this information across breeds, I think is very useful. Relative to the genomics component, it goes back to this idea of assignment of blame, right? If we get a sampling of genetic material from the breadth of the contemporary group, we get the good ones and the bad ones, we can find and sort out which genetic variants are contributing to the bad ones and which variants are contributing to the good ones. So we really need both pieces. Really good contemporary group reporting of the phenotype, and then a breadth of genomic information across that contemporary group to be able to sort those out.
So to follow up, I'm going to ask you one more follow-up to that, because as Tom mentioned earlier, there might be other breed associations out there that are considering this, but they might find themselves unique, or maybe they're worried that they're not as connected to some of the other breeds as some of the partners. As you're doing that exact process you just described, are we going to be able to find some new genomic pieces in those populations? Are we going to be able to address their needs long term as we constantly go through that process, that iteration that you described a few minutes ago?
Yeah, I think there's, the structure of IGS really lends itself to leverage, the collective data, right? So the shared information, genomics and phenotypes. But as, new participants come in, they immediately get to leverage those genetic relationships against the genomic data and the pedigree structures that already exist. But they also then have the opportunity, obviously, to build out, genetics or genomics programs to help bolster that improvement. So, maybe they're a smaller breed and their breeders haven't adopted genomics as quickly because the tool hasn't been as good. Well, joining this group helps really move that process along much quicker.
Marty, from your experiences or as you were reading the tea leaves, are there any potential things that we need to be wary of as we continue to evolve this model?
No, I feel like the progress you're making, I feel like it's very, very good. We can, again, from time to time, we can overwhelm our ultimate customer with information. I don't give our seed stock producers, I don't give them quite as much of an out on that because that's their job. But we can overwhelm the customer with too much. The value is far outweighing the pitfalls at this point. And I would just encourage IGS and you folks and Bob and your team, just push forward, rock on.
We're out there on the edge of the science too, and I think we've seen that within the workings of IGS. We have, I think, the best genetic scientific minds, or a good group of them together to work on this, but we are out there on the edge of the science and the size of the database. We're always learning, and we've got some things to improve. We've always got challenges when you're out on that edge. That's a good thing. I mean, that we are pushing forward and really, clearing the forest out and more grazing land there available, right? But it is work, and it will not be without a few humps and bumps along the way. So that's real, but we understand that too. We all understand that. If we're ever going to get there, we've got to go through that. And so that's the product of being on the cutting edge, right?
Certainly. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you all for participating. Thank you for watching. If you need more information, please reach out. Go to internationalgeneticsolutions.com. Thank you.
Stand Together was brought to you by Allflex Livestock Intelligence, with support in part from Neogen and the American Simmental Association. Learn more at internationalgeneticsolutions.com.